What's up, everybody? It's your girl Angela here with another episode of Come and Talk to Me show. We got the doctor.
What up, y'all?
Donald Grant in the building. Thank you for joining us. I always say us today.
We got a rep for Dame sitting behind the camera.
Yeah, my cameraman, my director, my editor, my husband, Dave behind the camera. One of also the most recent last times I saw you was at a focus group you were doing that was concentrating on mental health.
Black mental health.
And it's encompasses so many things. I feel like you need to come back like once a month because we could probably talk about
chop it up
into so many different things. But where to start? How are we doing in the Black community? Because I feel like we are tired.
We are.
We are exhausted.
We are. It's a double-edged sword, to be honest with you, because there's this fatigue that you're talking about, and we got to remember the general fatigue of the world right now, right? COVID fatigue, cabin fever fatigue, all that everybody's experiencing. And when you lay on top of that, this other stuff with the racial tensions and the racial reckoning and all the visible violations, it's challenging. But then you flip it and you also see things that we haven't seen since Reconstruction, like the level of accountability for white supremacy feels good to me, right? We're seeing people lose their jobs, people go to jail, and that in some ways is kind of a positive thing to the psyche, because race-based trauma is a thing and intergenerational trauma is a thing. So I'm not going to be too teachy right now, but just really quickly, intergenerational trauma is this construct that says you didn't have to experience the trauma to live with it. And so they first found out about it in the 60s with the children of Jewish Holocaust survivors. There were these therapists and they're like, well, why the hell is my entire caseload Jewish Holocaust survivors? And everybody's like, oh snap, mine too. And that's when they learned that the children of the survivors of the Holocaust were experiencing trauma of the Holocaust. And so there's this great book. It's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Now, it's not a diagnosis. Don't go looking in your DSM. But Dr. DeGreary, she tells this story. I was in a lecture of hers one day, and she said, you got two moms sitting at a basketball game together, and both their sons are out there playing. Both boys are mediocre at best. And the black mom looks at the white mom and says, oh, you must be so proud of, Johnny, he's doing so well, blah, blah, blah. White mom looks back, responds very humbly, yeah, we're proud of him, he's good, da, 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 da. White mom looks at the black mom and says, oh, you must be so proud of Kwame. I use stereotype names with my examples. Okay. You must be so proud of Kwame, he's doing so well. And the black mother looks back and she responds, girl, he a mess at home. He got all these girls calling the house. He ain't getting nothing but B's. And again, both these boys are doing the exact same thing. And a lot of families can resonate with that kind of story. If they haven't done it, they've seen it done before in different Black communities. And so Dr. DeGreary posits that the reason that Black mother responds in that way is because during times of enslavement, when the slave master would come and tell the slave mother how strong or how smart her son was, she knew he was preparing to sell him to another plantation. Wow. So she would go and say, Massa, he's a shiftless Negro, he ain't nothing, he's lazy, in order to stop him from being sold away. And so that's one of the examples that she gives on how this thing lives. And I noticed one in myself. I grew up in a Kojic church, Church of God in Christ. Yeah. And when you got up to go to the bathroom, you had to put your finger up and bow your head.
I just learned about this.
Isn't it bananas, right?
Crazy.
So when I found out that the reason you do that is because you had to let all the white people in the church know that your master gave you permission to get up and go to the restroom, I'm like, we still doing that. And when we talk about our mental health, when we talk about our wellness, we can't disaggregate the environment, the container in which our wellness grows. And right now, as it has been since we've been on this particular land, the container is so fucked up. Like, it's so messed up. And so for me, I say it's a double-edged sword because it's the part of the racial reckoning that feels great. Just this week, George Floyd's family got the settlement of $27 million, which is the largest settlement ever as it relates to this police violence, this white supremacy, right? And it's the city paying. But here's the question. Even though this is the biggest settlement, it's going to do a lot of good, some of it's being donated, so on and so forth. One of the notes of it is, you can pay to kill me. Because we're not changing the laws. We're not changing the systems. We're just paying people out. Breonna Taylor's family got $12 million. And again, that's great. Those people will never come back to this earth, and there's, accountability. But accountability doesn't make me more safe. It just says now there's just the cost. You can get in trouble.
Or not even get in trouble. Yeah.
You can write a check.
Right.
You can pay to kill me. And so right now we can't confuse these big payouts and all this shit for, what it's supposed to be. And so even though those things provide me with some level of peace, knowing that this accountability can keep going, blah, blah, blah. I'm a historian too, and we saw this type of thing during Reconstruction. And then right around the corner was Jim Crow, because we took our foot off the gas.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I think that is dangerous.
I do too. I thought that, unfortunately, when the George Floyd thing, not the George Floyd thing, when George Floyd was murdered.
I appreciate that reframe. That was good.
Yeah. How it happened right when COVID, when the shutdown happened, I was like, oh, this is kind of like the perfect storm, because people aren't distracted like they would normally be by their jobs and their commute, and everyone is at home with nothing to do. And so I think it was able to incite a bigger response. Because all of a sudden companies are talking about diversity, and there's all of these things. But I feel like also in the mix of that, we're getting a lot of things that mean, they added finna and child into the dictionary. Dude,
child,
all we want, we want to dismantle this system. We don't care if you say finna or child. If don't make my, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true.
Don't take Mrs. Butter, don't give us all these little things.
We didn't ask for that.
That's not what we want.
That's not what we asked for.
Does it hurt? No. But is it solving anything?
It's a box check.
Right. It's let me placate you. If I give you enough of this, will that make this thing better? And so my fear is,
think it does.
Right. And my fear is, as we come out of being locked down and get back to our normal lives, are people, especially people white people, going to care once they're re-distracted?
So that's the big question. And so I've run a small business since 2013, and it was primarily trauma training nonprofit organizations, training boards, and now it's all diversity training since the murder of George Floyd. I would love to be able to count on my business and not have to have my 9-to-5, but what I know is that people are not going to be allocating resources to this work in a year from now.
Yeah. And
so that is the fear, is exactly what you're saying, is that how are people going to keep the cadence? And people always talk about cultural competence. You can be competent in math, you can be competent in chemistry. There is no cultural competency. We want to build cultural empathy, and that is where you see the people who are different than the box checkers. I was invited to be on this task force for this really big foundation, and they wanted to identify organizations who are who are working against racism, and they wanted to give money out. And so they invite us to this meeting, and they talk about the millions and millions of dollars that they have and millions of dollars that they've given out to foundation. And they said, so we're so happy to have you guys here. Small group, maybe 8 people, 3 Black people, 3 Latinx people, and then the executive director. So I'm already seeing what's happening. So then they pull up the slide about what they're asking us to do. Again, this is right after this parade of the millions that they've done, and so on and so forth. So we have $100,000, and we want to find 10 organizations to split it between.
Okay.
I'm like, I could spend $10,000 right now talking to you. And this is what this is what you brought me here for. You wanted to get my picture on your website so that you could show. And so there are these things that, to your point, people are looking to placate, and that's dangerous. I mean, not to deliberately circle back, but as a segue back to the mental health piece, it's a setup by which people feel like authentic change is happening, and then the rug is pulled from underneath them because all of the efforts were so superficial. And so what we have to do is maintain this cadence towards not just dismantling white supremacy, but honoring our mental wellness by saying, if we don't fix the container, we'll continue to hurt, and it's never going to be better. But it's a long road. It's a long road.
Yeah. Are there like, you know, someone had said that there is a difference between Black mental health and white mental health. Would you agree with that, or is it that the focus of what we need to focus on is different than our white?
That's what it is. Even between genders, like there needs to be different foci sometimes as it relates to, like, if your therapist with you would focus on some, even if people were going through the same ecological experience, you know, the focus would be different. So absolutely. In fact, that focus group that you mentioned earlier is a contract that I have with LA County Department of Mental Health to run Black mental health workshops and to talk about the ecology of Blackness and how that does create a unique set of race-based stresses that other people don't experience. Even right now, when we're talking about all of the violence against Asian Americans, you know, that's a huge thing right now, and people don't realize that's baked into white supremacy. And so when I talk about the rug being pulled from under you, Asian Americans across the country are like, what in the world is this? There's always been violence against Asian Americans and all people of color, but what we're seeing right now is different, and it's a lot to do with the xenophobia and the, you know, coronavirus being attributed. But here's the thing we don't talk about, is that Asian Americans have been used by white supremacy as a trope to maintain separation between people of color. That whole model minority thing, the whole model minority thing was created in order to make sure that Asian Americans didn't align with other Black and brown Americans to keep that separation. And now, as we're seeing white supremacy dismantle, we're also seeing proximity to white supremacy dismantling. And that's what Asian Americans are seeing now. And so now you see Asian Americans, which is so I don't know, is enheartening a word? Is enheartening the opposite of disheartening?
Anyways, disheartening?
It's enheartening for me. It makes me feel good.
There we go.
To see so many Asian Americans recognizing that their liberation is grounded in everybody's liberation. And that they're fighting against this, and they're understanding that, you know, it's the same thing. And many Asian Americans were compelled not to stand up against anti-Black racism because they had been convinced, if I say something about that, they're going to come for me. So I'm just going to keep my head down, run my business, run my store, and not fight for the rights of Black and Latinx people because, you know, the white people are giving me my good stuff. Now they see white supremacy doesn't even care about white people. You saw what they did at the Capitol. They killed a white cop. I mean, so, you know, it is unique, a unique experience for every single group. And then you have the intersections in those groups. And so we do need to focus on, particularly in mental health, the difference between equity and equality. Equality is giving everybody the same thing. Equity is giving people what they need. Women live in a world that's very different from men. And, you know, when I walk down the street at night when the world was open, I could be on Twitter, whatever, where a woman is walking through the street with her keys positioned as a knife because she lives in a world that's different from mine. And, you know, if mental health doesn't honor that, it's problematic. It's problematic.
What? Oh, gosh, I have so many things to talk to you about. So I was watching an interview with Daniel, and I'm never going to say his last name correctly, but the actor Daniel from Black Panther and Judas and the Messiah.
I know it starts with an O-L, but I can't say the whole thing.
So he was talking about white supremacy, and he said, and I'm so going to paraphrase because I can't, but he said, I don't like to say white supremacy, because even saying the word supremacy is giving them a power. It's implying that they are more supreme, than everyone else. And I think we need to call it, basically, I can't remember the word he used, but he said we need to call it something else, because even that is, our body takes in the words that we use. And when we say, like, basically white people are supreme, when we're saying white supremacy, like, we're taking that in and it's resonating in us. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. And he also has an international context. He's British.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother conversation about the racism in the UK, where they feel like just because there were no plantations in London, wasn't no racism. But we see that now with that interview with Meghan Markle and Harry. We see it all there. Mm-hmm. But I don't agree with that. I understand his sentiment. But for me, white supremacy is not a person. It is a world philosophical framework that white is supreme over others. And I feel like if we don't call it what it is, we're going to lose sight of the battle required to dismantle it. And for instance, when we think about white American identity development, when European immigrants arrived here, they weren't white. Like, they were Irish, they were Jewish, they were Italian, they were Polish. And the descendants of the colonists didn't fuck with them. They were like, you go over here and live with all these other black people who were recently freed from slavery, because we don't want you. And then the descendants of the colonists saw them aligning. They saw labor unions forming between black people and Eastern European immigrants, so on and so forth. And then they said, oh snap, we can't have this, because this is going to be a problem if they all join together. Mm-hmm. And so the descendants of the colonists began to go, and they would say, like, to the Polish immigrant, if you cut that SKI off the back of your last name,
right,
I'll let you enroll your kid in my school. Mr. Italian immigrant, if you and your wife stop cooking all that garlicky food, I'll let you buy a house on my street. Mr. Irish immigrant, if you blah, 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 you can come and apply for a job at my workplace. European immigrants threw away their culture to become white. And when we talk about mental health, we're not talking about that. Because if you look at old pictures of lynchings, you see like little 9 and 10-year-old girls there. You guys got a kid, think about it for a minute. You like come home and say, oh, grab a lunchbox and a snack. We about to go chase a black dude down, hanging from a tree and set him on fire.
Right.
What? Now those little girls in those pictures are currently the ages of grandmothers of college students. And we're acting like that's not the case. And so the next book that I'm working on is called White on White Crime, Old Lies in Contemporary Times, to talk about, when we look at what happened at the Capitol, I get it. It makes sense. These dudes have been lied to all their lives. Sorry. No, it's all good. These dudes have been lied to all their lives. Their fathers are telling them, you are supreme. Our race is superior. This is the first time they learn.
And it's crumbling.
This is the first time they learn that it's not. I'd be pissed too. I would storm the fucking Capitol too.
Right? Yeah.
We gotta talk. We don't talk about that all the time, right? And I'm not trying to give white people grace for white supremacy. I'm just saying, let's understand what's happening, because right now we're giving insulin where we need to be giving chemo. And that's the problem, is we're minimizing, oh, they're crazy people. No. They've been lied to for 400 years about their superiority.
Yeah.
And the whole container has been structured to trick them into it's like the Truman Show.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent example.
It's like the Truman Show.
Right.
So.
Okay. But so, for us.
I forgot to take my Claritin today. I'm so mad about it.
Sorry. Are you allergic to the dog?
No, I'm not allergic to the dog. I'm allergic to the world.
Got it. Okay. I'm like, because he's hypoallergenic.
No.
The world is not.
I'm not allergic to the dog. I'm allergic to the world.
So a part of, like, how you said that they've been lied to for 400 years, we've also been lied to, right?
Yep.
For 400 years. And so how do we start tearing away and just chipping away at some of our trauma, at some of our, like, generational curses that we pass down, at some of our, how do we start? Like, I have been trying to, since I had a baby, I am so, like, don't play with my child in these generational curses. Like, what we're not going to do is...
So give me an example of something that, like, one of these related to our ethnicity.
So,
something that you
okay.
guys are breaking.
Here's an example. My husband's side of the family is brown skin.
Mm-hmm.
She's, as we are brown skin also, but we're on the lighter side
Right.
of the melanin palette or whatever. You know, like, we're not going to have jokes that she's lighter than everybody else.
Good.
Because that causes a feeling of separation, you know.
Yep.
And even though, you know, obviously everybody making these jokes would love her and mean
Of
no
course,
harm,
of
but we
course.
do know from previous experiences that this makes someone feel isolated and separate.
And suddenly she and her cousins aren't getting along.
Right. Or yeah, you feel like you don't,
'Cause you
you're the black
created-
sheep of the family.
Yeah.
Or I've had, you know, her hair texture is different than my hair texture, you know. And I'll get like comments of, you know, she don't have the type of hair that you wear down. Of course she does. Everybody
It's not
has a
even
type
me.
of hair that you
Yep.
wear down, you know.
Yep.
And to me, I'm like, I'm hype about her hair texture because she can wear so many styles that I can't wear. So then it's like, you need to comb her hair. I'm like, it is comb into an afro. Like,
Yep, yep,
but because
yep.
we've been taught like, you know, your hair needs to be slicked and like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? All of these things. So I'm very serious about, and I don't like, you know, who it is, I don't care. Like, I will go to the mat.
Yeah.
Don't say that to her.
Don't
like,
say it.
Don't do that. Like, we're not going to do
We don't
this.
talk about
because
that.
we, you know, I've experienced it growing up. I'm sure everyone has in some kind of way.
Of course.
You know, and we need to stop that.
We have to.
How do
now,
we
how
stop
do you
that?
do you get pushback from other black people when you begin to kind of implement those rules? When you say things like, "Oh no, we don't do that here. There's no good hair or bad hair in our conversations. It's just different hair."
I think maybe because of like who the person is, right? So my approach has to be garnished from who the person is. So say if it's someone I respect a lot, then I try to, maybe my first time correcting it was jokingly.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because
Right.
you don't want like the tension there. So
Right.
you're just like, nah, like, ha ha, da da,
Right.
we're not going to do that. You
Right.
know, like,
Right.
and then,
Right.
but as it like continued on, then it's just like, you know, it's my job to protect my child no matter what.
That's
so
it.
now all of this has to stop. Like, you know, and I just had to say, listen, I don't care if you think this way. I'm not trying to change the way that you think. Like, that's
Right
up to
here.
you. But like, what you won't do is say it to her.
It's not happening.
That's not gonna, like, that's what we're not. Okay. So like, that's how I
Yeah.
try to choose to approach it, because, you know, and it's not like I'm not trying to fight you. I'm not trying to anything, but I am trying to protect her because we know better now than what we knew before. And so, I mean, I'll give you a point of reference. I hate talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it on camera because we're being open and honest here. I remember I went to a water park with members of my church, and I have naturally straight hair.
Mhm.
Like, it takes a lot for me to actually get my hair to curl.
Okay.
Anyway, so, and it's straight, even wet.
Mm.
So, go to the water park, get in the water, get out the water, and my hair is straight.
Right.
And so everyone starts calling me Baywatch is the joke, right?
Wow.
And they're laughing, and I have no choice. You know, I'm young and you're
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but everybody else is laughing, so I have to laugh too. But they don't understand that I feel like you're laughing at me.
Yeah.
Like, you're not laughing with me because I don't find this
Right,
as funny.
right, 'cause I ain't
If
laughing.
this isn't funny, I can't control the way that my hair,
Right.
you know. And you calling me Baywatch is not you trying to imply like I'm some sexy vixen
No.
getting out the water. You're implying that I'm white. And never in the black community is it a good thing
Never.
to be called white.
No,
You
it's
know what I'm
always
saying?
pejorative.
It's exactly. And so, yeah, we're laughing, but you're actually being offensive and you're being hurtful.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I'm so sensitive to it where she's concerned, because
you don't want her to have those injuries.
I don't want her to have that.
There's so many things, and this is a part of why black mental health is different, right? Because black parenting is different. The things that we have to think about are very different. We were in Whole Foods one day, and we walked in, and there's this whole watermelon display. And my son had to be 3 years old, 4 years old, and he loved watermelon, as do most people in the world. It's a very refreshing fruit, especially while cold.
Yes.
It's a good piece of
Yes.
fruit, right?
It's the summertime fruit.
It's the summertime fruit. So we walk into Whole Foods, and we are in a primarily all-white neighborhood. We're at Fairfax and Santa Monica, a diverse community, but that Whole Foods. as our
Yeah.
mini Whole Foods, our primary layer. So we walk in, watermelon right there. My son, watermelon, daddy, daddy, water. He is dancing, he is singing, and I'm sitting there about to shit on myself.
Yes.
He is in here singing and dancing about watermelon. And you know, in our heads, we create this movie, right? And
Yes.
so I saw the lights come on, I saw a band come out, I saw everybody surround him, like we were at the promenade and he was doing a stage show. And I wanted to say, stop.
Uh-huh.
But then I thought, this is watermelon. A neutral stimulus
Mm-hmm.
that is only connected to foolishness if I connect it for him.
Yeah.
Right now, at this age, he has no context that daddy would never be sitting at a buffet, sitting at a table with a piece of watermelon.
Not in front of white people.
Not in front of nobody. I will only eat watermelon buffet style, cut up with a knife and a fork. You will never, because of that. And I'm like, don't give that to him.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why give that to him? Why, like, if he was sitting here celebrating, like, Kit Kats, that'd be a problem. This is fruit.
Yeah.
A good piece of fruit. And so, you know, those like the hair example and all that, those are things that we have to combat, like our subconscious. Like, for me not to snatch him up, it's kind of like I had to go through a process. And I tell that story all the time because as superficial as
I get it.
it was a burden that I had to take on that wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's related to the container in which we exist that dictates so many things. Whether or not how we manage it, that's separate, but it just says so many things.
I have a friend that was a part of a mass shooting, and it was a racially incited shooting, and she was a victim or whatever. And she and I were actually just talking about it last weekend. And she said something that blew my mind. And this shooting happened like 3 years ago. And of all the things like that I thought that she could have said, she said, and one of my biggest fears was me going back to work being the black girl who was shot. And I was like, oh my God. Like of all the things that, like, you know, just obviously the trauma of being
Right.
shot and all of this stuff.
But
But how crazy was like, I hadn't even considered that. And like, that's why I'm always like,
Wow.
we get into these conversations and I think people are like, you know, we all know better now, but I'm like, but it's so deep and it's so ingrained into everything that every time you peel back an onion that you think that you healed from, you know, there's 57 more layers underneath and like different angles and different versions of it.
Yeah.
And
I didn't want to be the black girl going back to work who got shot. That's
and
real.
it's not that she was at a club, you know, it wasn't she's in a gang.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like she literally
She
was
could've
a
got
straight
shot.
victim
Yeah.
of a white person's, you know,
It don't matter.
and like, and now she feels like she has to carry a stigma.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Everybody like, I heard Sharon got shot. Yeah, Sharon got shot. Oh, the black. Oh.
Makes sense.
Right.
I had
That's
a friend
soft.
tell me she was talking to a coworker and she was saying that she was going to my baby shower, and he made a joke that said, the coworker made a joke, white coworker, that said, does she know who the father is? And so, and now, and the crazy part is, it's okay for him to make the joke in this you know, professional environment, but if she would react the way that she wanted to and should have,
It would
it would have
have been a problem.
been a problem. Whereas his comment was the one that was completely, you know, inappropriate. But it's just like that quick. That's what you think?
That quick.
Like that quick, you know?
And that's a part of white supremacy too.
Absolutely.
It creates that thought pattern, and there are so many deliberate factors in the world that kind of facilitate it. There was this report about all of the books that were published, all the children's books that were published. I don't have the 2021, the most recent I have is the 2018 data, that of all children's books published in 2018, 50% had leading white characters in the children's books. 23% had trucks and cars and animals as the leading protagonists in the children's books. All children of color made up only 23% of lead characters in children's books in the whole year of 2018. That means that you had more books for children being led by animals and trucks than you did have for Black, Latinx, Asian American, indigenous people all combined. So when we talk about how this stuff forms, it's not a coincidence that 80 to 90% of the publishing industry are white people, because they're the gatekeepers to what we feed our children.
Yeah.
And many of us have to travel miles and miles and miles just to find books where our kids can see themselves in, and then find the book not just that our kids can see themselves in, but where they're not fighting gang violence, or trying to get the basketball scholarship, or trying to be a rap star. All those things are fine, but it's not fine if that's the only story that's there. And so, when we talk about how do we create this mental space that does as well, we got to talk about the container. Children's books, adult media. I did an assessment on all the Black people that have ever been nominated for an Oscar for leading role.
How many was that?
Or not. So for men, it was about 21, I think, and 21 nominations, and that includes men who have been nominated more than once, so on and so forth. The winners, there were like maybe 9, and so when you look at who won and then who was nominated and who didn't win, it speaks to the same narrative, right? And so the winners were like Sidney Poitier for Lilies of the Valley, Lilies of the Field. Wonderful movie, but it's the magical Negro trope. Black people are only here to support the goals of the white protagonist. Sidney, in spite of his wonderful performance, he was written to only care about getting those nuns to get that town and that church set up. When you look at Morgan Freeman in $1 Million Baby, you know nothing about him. And Morgan Freeman has a litany of magical Negro roles that he's been put out for, that he's worked for. Then you have Denzel in Training Day and Glory, an enslaved man and a dirty cop. So all of the winners had tropes of toxic masculinity, substance abuse, magical Negro, everyone. And so what we're talking about is, what images do we not just show, but celebrate about Black men and women? Similar thing for Black women in those wins. We got Monique for Precious, thank you. We got Monique for Precious. We have, again, the exact same thing, Lupita Nyong'o for playing an enslaved woman. We got, I think, Viola Davis for The Help. All these same roles that want to pitch this same narrative. Now, the Black men who were nominated who didn't win. Denzel for Malcolm X.
Yep.
Malcolm X is not a character that you want to promote.
No.
Will Smith for Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali is not a character you want to promote. Now, people question Will's performance in that. That's a different conversation. Nonetheless, Don Cheadle for Hotel Rwanda. Hotel Rwanda is all about the genocide that was created as a result of European colonization. And then you got Morgan Freeman for Nelson Mandela. None of those roles won, yet we promote all this other stuff. And so I'm saying all that to say is that we continue to create this environment. So Oscar So White is not just Oscar So White. Oscar So White is breaking the business continuity model of our oppression. We have to do it. We have to do it. Our mental health, our sanity, the lives of our children, the longevity of how we live. We're dying early as a result of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's inextricably woven together, and it's impossible to disaggregate mental health from physical health from racism. They go together.
So, this leads me into, I did want to talk to you about physical health, but I'm going to get there in a second. I have a question about, we have all these things, even down to the movies that we make, the TV shows, etc., right?
Yep.
So there's an uproar about, you referenced Meghan Markle, and I'm not even talking about all of those things. I'm going to reference how people say they felt like she spent a lot of time passing. And we've heard stories of, Black people in the past that have passed.
Yeah.
And it sparked a question. If we know, we have all these obstacles set up against us, these roadblocks, etc., and we're doing all that we can to get through, right? Yeah. If one of the things that we can do to get through, if you had the option or the ability to pass, and that could potentially give you a little bit of an easier life, a little bit of a breathing room, set your family up in a different way, should you or should you not take that opportunity? And if you choose to, is that in some way, turning your back on the Black community?
That's a big question. I think time context plays a role in that. Mm-hmm. And so, if this was 1842, no question. If I experienced skin privilege, and there's all those stories about the person who was of mixed race because the slave master raped the enslaved woman, and this child was born as a biracial person, mulatto, as they use the term now. Everybody please know mulatto is a pejorative term. You can't use it now. It's like Oriental. Oriental is reserved for inanimate objects, not people. But in the census, they had this listing of quadroon, octroon, mulatto, and this is all in like the 1850s and 1860. I think it was 1860 was when they started, because they needed to quantify exactly how much Black blood you have.
Right. Yeah.
And so when we talk about passing, if this was 1842 and I was able to move to Chicago and live my life as a white person, chances are I may have done it. I don't know. Chances are I may have done it, but who knows? Contemporarily, again, there's no space in the world in which I pass. I do get to use my academic privilege to a degree that others may not be able to. And so, I am able to call the Ivy and say, yes, Dr. Grant would like a table for 3 on the veranda. And I get a table for 3 on the veranda. But when you talk about passing, you gotta know that there's a part of your soul that you sell. Mm-hmm. When you are not allowed to live inside that authentic cultural truth. Now, you may be willing to do the cost-benefit analysis and say, okay, I am going to do it, just like the European immigrants did. They threw away their Irishness, and just now, in the last 15 years, you see people going back to it. So I'm not white, I'm German. Awesome. I'm so glad that you finally thought to reattach to that, because you were dying inside as a result. And that's this attachment to white supremacy. As it relates to women and men currently who people say are passing, I feel, this may be controversial, I feel that Black people have worked too hard at deciding who is Black enough and who is not Black enough.
Ooh, this is my next question. So, you done stepped in the pool.
So that for me, when we talk about a Meghan Markle or whomever it may be, who happens to have skin privilege and hair texture privilege, and I'm not speaking about those things in a negative way, just as factual things.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if them benefiting from the skin privilege in the world is them actively passing. Mm-hmm. I grew up for the earlier part of my life in a housing project, and then my mother hates when I tell like this. Then we just moved to a nicer ghetto after that, where people own their houses. And so, I was bused to this great magnet school that was away from my neighborhood.
You and I have this life.
And so when we returned back to our neighborhood, oh, Donald, you talk white.
Yep.
My response would always be, "It's actually you speak white." I would never say that, but it would be that thing, right?
Yep.
Because we've been trained to quantify Blackness in a certain way, and if you ain't Wu-Tang Black, you ain't Black. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem, and it's something that we in the Black community need to reckon with. And it's not unique to us. Let's be clear.
No, yes.
I may have been called an Oreo growing up, and for those of you who don't know, Oreo's black outside, white inside. But I hear my Latinx friends talk about being coconuts.
Oh, there's a lot of colorism
Yeah,
in that community.
yeah. But coconuts, brown on the outside, white on the inside. And so these are all tropes of white supremacy. And we have to manage them as such. And so I can't speak for what is inside of a person who is lighter skinned or has a different hair texture. I mean, I ain't got no hair. But when I do have hair, it's only on the sides. I can't speak to their intent. But what I'm not gonna do is quantify somebody's blackness if their experience is an authentic presentation of that blackness from them, right? I can't question that. Like, I went to school with all types of black people. I went to a black college. I mean, all types of black people at a black college, from your, quote unquote Carltons, as we had that stereotype on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, to your Wills, as we had that stereotype. And so, what I'm not going to do is try to define blackness through white supremacy and agree that you get to define your own blackness, but you do have to decide if your blackness is being defined through a lens of white supremacy. I do think that's a valuable conversation, in that some people engage in certain behaviors, buy certain things, so on and so forth, because they are operationalizing their blackness through white supremacy, and it's not a deliberate decision. If you press your hair and you press your hair just because you like your hair pressed, boom, I'm fine with that. Everybody ain't gotta walk around with natural hair, and who's to say that natural hair with heat ain't natural still?
Yeah.
And so I think that's
my
important.
hairdresser actually says it is. Even when you apply heat, it's natural hair.
It's still not. It's the
hair that grows out of your head.
It's the hair that grows out of your head. And the fact that California had to pass a law, the Crown Act, that says you cannot discriminate against me because of the way that my hair grows out of my head, says so much about this. And so, as long as we are working on ensuring that our decisions are not connected to the traumas of white supremacy. I think, however, anybody operationalizes their blackness is their choice and their decision. And I would never, try to drag somebody for that. But now there are people, let's be fair.
Okay.
And I don't know her history specifically, but there are people who are, in fact, deliberately taking advantage and hiding pieces of themselves for it. Candace Owens, for instance. It's okay to be a black Republican. I'm fine with that. But Candace Owens is an example of a black Republican who is a black Republican to be anti-blackness in many ways. Her policies, her framework is that way. And there's a way to be a Republican and not be that. We see lots of them.
Yeah.
So,
but let me ask you this. Do you think we all, at times, hide a piece of, like, say if we live in, say if you live in Compton, maybe in a circle of white people, you don't want to say that you live in Compton because you think that, or that it's going to frame the way that they see you. They'll see you completely different, if they know that part of you. Or, I'm a single mother. Or
you went to a historically black
college.
I
went to a historically black college. Or, maybe my father is in prison, or whatever the case may be. Do we hide these things that we know are recognized as stereotypes of our community to get through?
That's the challenge. I love fried chicken.
Listen, you want to hear something crazy? White people love fried chicken.
Everybody loves fried chicken.
I mean, they might not like it seasoned and fried like we like it, but
they may not need hot sauce all the time. But everybody loves.
How dare you make us feel bad for eating fried chicken, and they will